Yes, I am filming this on the 4th of July, and my roommates have people over. So we're gonna hope you can't hear anything and that the mic is doing its job. Hey guys, my name is Haley, and I'm going to be filming my Pride Month wrap up today. I only read 10 books, I think, of the 20 some I had on my TBR. There was a whole week where I didn't even touch a book while we were out of town. Things did not go according to plan. Am I going to try to add some of those to my July TBR? Yes. Am I going to film a July TBR? Probably not. I'm already behind on filming. If you're seeing this when it's supposed to go up on like the first Tuesday of July, then that means that I took the entire last week off because I was overwhelmed. Because we're still looking for housing and everything. And the filming did not happen. My last reading vlog for Pride did not happen. I do have 10 minutes of footage, which is not enough for a vlog. So you will see that in another vlog eventually, but not what it was originally for. Because I do have footage I like and want to keep. And I don't want to abandon it. So it'll end up in another vlog here soon, hopefully. But I'm here to talk about the 10 books that I read in the month of June. I think I have talked about all of these except for one in some other video. So I will have all of my Pride vlogs linked down below as well. And if you haven't seen them, I made 4 book recommendation videos. I think it was the Heated Rivalry vlog, and then 3 recommendations. It was the Ultimate Sapphic Book Guide, Male Male Romance, and Underrated Queer Reads. I believe those are the ones that I did end up filming during the month. I would really appreciate it if you could go back and watch those and comment, subscribe, both on this video and those if you have not seen them already. I would really appreciate it. It helps grow the channel, and I'm going to jump right into all of my thoughts on a lot of the books that I read this month. I do think this is the least amount of books I read in the month of June in years, since I started doing the only reading queer books during the month of June, which I've been doing for 4 years, if not longer. I know I started doing it around the time that I came back to Booktube after my super long break after leaving my church cult. Do I know what year that was off the top of my head? No. I think I've blocked it out. But the first book that I read in the month of June was The Long Game by Rachel Reed. This is one of the sequels to Heated Rivalry. The book, the Game Changer series in general, I have read completely out of order. I'm not gonna lie. I started with Heated Rivalry. I watched the show. I wanted to read Shane and Ilya's other book, which is this one, which is book 6. And then I think the book that's coming out next year, around the same time as season 2 of the show, is also going to be Shane and Ilya, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm incorrect, please let me know. But with how much hype that series has gotten over the last year, and how nobody on the financial marketing side of things has gathered the fact that we don't want more hockey romances, we want more queer stories. It wasn't the hockey. The hockey was not the thing everybody liked about Heated Rivalry. Hate to break it to you, there was barely any hockey in Heated Rivalry. And as somebody who doesn't even read a lot of sports romance in general, the sports are never the reason I like the sports romances, ever. Please stop gathering that from all of the things. We want more queer stories. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But I loved this book. I want to get into the spoiler reason, but I know a lot of people have not read this one unless you were obsessed with the show like I was and actually went back and reread the books. I am going to read the rest of the series. I've read 3 of them, of the 6 that are out right now. All of the ones that were involved in the show in some way, shape, or form. But I loved this. I loved seeing more of Shane and Ilya. I loved the conclusion to this, of how things ended up working out for them, and I'm going to leave that vague on purpose because I really enjoyed this. I gave this 5 stars. I think the Heated Rivalry was between a 4.5 and 4.75. But I also think that opinion is colored by the fact that I adore the show so much. I already went back and started to rewatch it, which is not something I have done with a show in over a decade. I'm very much, if and when I do watch shows, which is not very often anymore, I watch it once, I get through it. It usually takes me a few years to get through a whole season of something, and then I move on. I understand this is only 6 episodes, so it's a little easier to rewatch, but I've already rewatched half of the season again for a second time. I'm very much obsessed with, I think it's episode 3, where they call each other by their first names during the scene. Possibly my favorite part of the whole series. Not gonna lie. But yes, I love this. I gave this 5 stars. I cannot wait for the book that is coming out next year. Very much still on the heated rivalry train, and I am also going to hopefully read Jacob Tierney's book that comes out in October later this year. That's like him talking about how they made the show. Very excited for that. I also am going to try, I ended up finding both of these physically. I think I had footage of that in one of my vlogs for my birthday, question mark. And I want to get the Jacob Tierney book that's coming out later, as well as the like edition deluxe, whatever they're calling it, of the physical media version of Heated Rivalry that's supposed to come out next year alongside season 2 of the show and book 7 coming out all around the same time, I think within like a month or so of each other. And on that subject, I just want to quickly touch on the subject of physical media being a thing. I know we've been talking about this for like the last year, especially. I know it became a thing when a lot of people were buying up books, me being one of them, especially thrifting wise, of like going to the Goodwill bins, which I did a lot earlier last year, of buying physical media, which is something I've been slowly doing over time, but also with the announcement. And as somebody who's not a big gamer, don't come for me, I just have heard about this happening and all of the discourse surrounding it about Sony like discontinuing their physical media like for their games and stuff is crazy to me. I've been in a few GameStops over the last like couple of weeks looking for N64 things, which is a thing me and my partner have been looking for and trying to get back into for the nostalgia of it all. There are so many people that are so angry about them discontinuing physical media in general, because in today's day and age, we don't really own anything. And that is depressing when you think about it for more than 2 seconds. Do I think you should be able to own things digitally? Yes. Do I think you should be able to own it physically? Also, yes. Do I think you should have the choice of which of those you're going to have? Also, yes. Taking away the choice entirely of even the option of owning anything physically is a very dangerous precedent, especially with how easy it is to change physical copies of things. Not to say that I don't own things that are also only on digital. I own a lot of Kindle books that I only own digitally. I prefer to own them physically, and that is just my opinion based on the way the internet and everything we own works nowadays. But now that I've been ranting about that for over 6 minutes, I'm going to go back to my wrap up of what I read in the month. But yes, love the long game. It has made me think about a lot of other things, obviously. Then the second book that I read was Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. This is lesbian theater kids with socialist uprisings in the 1800s. If you want to hear me like rave about this book, it's going to be on my favorite books of the year. Like, it has even stuck with me longer and longer. I think, according to my notes, I apparently gave it 4.5 stars. This is by far a 5-star book. I don't know where I pulled 4.5 from. Maybe because I was comparing it to Heated Rivalry at the time. Please ignore that. This is a 5-star book for me. I loved the time frame that this followed our main character. I loved her queer journey of like somebody who did not have the language that we have today for whatever she identified as in that time. She just knew that she was attracted to women. And she has several romances with several different women over the course of this book. This is like a 500-page historical queer fantasy, and I ate up every second of it. This book definitely gave me the confidence to say that I really, really love historical fiction when it is queer in some way, shape, or form. And I'm so excited to read Fingersmith because I believe that's the favorite of everybody who's read a lot of Sarah Waters, if I'm not mistaken. And then for the last mention of Heated Rivalry in this, I ended up reading Game Changer, which is also by Rachel Reed. This is the first book in the series. I actually think it's the name of the series, is the Game Changer series, and this is Scott and Kip's book. I love this so much. I give this 4.5. This is probably on par with Heated Rivalry for me, but I enjoy Shane and Ilya just the slightest bit more than Kip and Scott. But I love Kip and Scott so much. I love Scott Hunter so much, which is so funny to me because the first time I ever heard about him is like Shane and Ilya making fun of him in Heated Rivalry. But right away from his episode in the show, I loved him so much. I'm so glad they got their own like storyline and episode in the series. And I really hope we get to see more of them in season 2. But I gave this 4.5 stars. And then the next book that I read was Conversion Therapy Dropout. This is by Timothy Schrader Rodriguez. And I can't tell how I feel about this. I gave it 5 stars off the bat because it is my like knee-jerk reaction to give people stories who are exvangelical, especially queer exvangelical, the space to tell their stories is very, very important to me. But also the way that this is told is very different from a lot of like conversion therapy type stories that you've probably heard. And that's because Timothy in this book never seemed to have fully deconstructed his mindset around Christianity and wanted to remain a Christian and remain in these spaces as a queer person, but was willing to hide himself for it. And I don't know how I feel about that. I understand it's his lived experience. I understand it's an important story to tell. I don't know if that is something I would recommend to other people to try doing, because it was a big, difficult thing that he was trying to do. Like, it took him so long to even come to terms with his own sexuality because he kept re-enrolling himself in conversion therapy, which is like a very strange form of self-harm in my brain that I cannot comprehend. Thankfully, I'm glad that I can't, because it seems very, very scary to me. But I think I'm going to end up settling on like a 4-star for this. The audiobook is excellent. I loved hearing all of his work. He ended up working with Hillsong at one point, which if you were Exvangelical, you know exactly who that is, and probably sang like hundreds of their songs in your churches. I definitely did. But this was an interesting story. It was very different. I just don't know that I liked it or liked the way that he framed his reasons for doing things. I just kind of felt bad for him a lot. And then I read Providence Girls. This was the one book that I finished while we were out of town. And that's because I listened to the audiobook of it. And this is a Sapphic, like, fantasy, like, romance that's told almost in, like, one of the characters, like, reminiscing about their time with our other character and how they met and how they fell in love with each other and how it was, like, forced proximity. But it is of one of our main characters turning into this sea creature. It reminds me a lot of the synopsis of that shark book that came out years ago. What is that called? If I can find it, I will put it up here. But it's that shark book where like the man is slowly over the series, over the course of the book, like turning into a shark. It reminded me of that, but Sapphic. I haven't even read that book, but I feel like that's exactly what I imagined that book to be. But I really, really liked the writing in this, and I would absolutely read something else by the same author. Then I just very quickly listened to the audiobook of Cleat Cute. This is a Sapphic sports romance of these two girls who are on a football team or soccer team, depending on what country you're from. I believe it was in America, unless I'm mistaken. I read this very quickly. I just kind of binged the audiobook. I liked it. I gave it 4 stars. The people I've heard talk about this say this is like one of their favorite spicy Sapphic books. It is spicy. I will give it that. It was not my favorite. But that also might just be I don't really care for sports romances a lot of the time. And they have to be very, very interesting for me to love them. And then I finally read Saint by Sierra Simone. I read the other 2 books of this over 3 years ago. And I don't think at the time that I knew the third one was queer. And when I found out it was queer, I was like, oh, I'm going to love that. And then for some reason just never picked it up. And then I found out my library has the audiobook. So I listened to this. This is told, what's his name? The really, really famous romance audiobook narrator that everybody loves, Jacob Morgan. Is that his name? If I'm mistaken, forgive me. I said it at some point in one of my vlogs. But this is the story of 2 men who were in a relationship, and one night one of the men leaves in the middle of the night without telling anyone and goes off and becomes a monk. And then it's his story years later when he's been a monk for several years and his ex comes back to visit for some closure, and it turns into more than just closure. It's very spicy. This is Sierra Simone. There's also a lot of religious, like, exvangelical commentary or just religious commentary in general, because this series in general is really good at not mocking Christianity, but also showing the nuance of a lot of people who want to still believe but don't have the ability to, in this case, rectify the fact that he is queer and also a Catholic monk. I don't think he's Catholic. Is he Catholic? I feel like they're Catholic because his brother is Catholic. And there's nuns and stuff. I don't know. Don't ask me. I should know because I am of the exvangelical variety, but monks and like nuns and all of that, not my forte. Don't really know what's going on there. But I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. I'm glad that I finally read it to round off that series. If anything, it made me finally finish the series, which I don't remember the last time I did that. Next up, I read Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This is a thriller of two men who their sons were married, and neither of the men really were necessarily very involved in their sons' lives because they had issues coming to terms with the fact that their sons were queer, let alone married, and then their sons are killed and they have to work together to solve the mystery of their son's murder because the police are not doing their job in doing that. Also, both men are ex-cons. I feel like that's an important part of this story as well. I really enjoyed the racism discussions in this book, and I'm very much looking forward to reading more by this same author. I gave this 3.75 4 stars. I'm personally not a big thriller person. A thriller has to be very, very good for me to enjoy it, and I can name like possibly 5 thrillers that I actually genuinely really, really love. This is not going to make it onto my like 5 favorite thrillers list. I'm very picky with them now because I read so many of them years ago. But I did enjoy this. I really enjoyed this author's writing, and I'm glad that I switched over to the audiobook, which I know I started out reading this one physically, and then I switched over to the audio because it's told in the South, and I felt like the accents were as much of a part of the story as anything else, and I'm glad that I did switch to the audiobook. I definitely recommend doing that. And I'm very much looking forward to his one book, All Sinners Bleed. I think that one's going to be very much up my alley. This one, solid, like 3.75, maybe 4 star. Then I think one of the only books I haven't actually like fully wrapped up yet in here is Woodworking by Emily St. James. I think I had started it at the end of the last vlog that I have up, and then I have clips of it in the vlog that never really came to fruition, will come out at a later date. And that is Woodworking. I really enjoyed this novel. I did not see the end twist coming at all. This is the story of a teacher who is trans and is really, really quickly coming to terms with the fact that she may be trans. She's in her 40s. She lives in South Dakota, and she has a trans student. And this tackles a lot of subjects about queer identity in general in this, but also about the concept of passing as trans, especially if you come out later in life. What that does to your relationships if, in this case, our teacher is already divorced. I believe they were divorced. And there's a messy, like, second chance situation with that. There's a lot of just, like, fear of being outed because she lives in an area where trans people are not very accepted. Queer people in general are not very accepted in this area, being South Dakota. And she comes to terms with her identity a lot by watching one of her students who is out and proud and trans, and who, to our knowledge, is the only queer person in the school, let alone trans person. And there's a lot of comparison between the lives of people who are able to come out younger and earlier in life and able to get like puberty blockers and stuff, as well as somebody who comes out later in life who does not have that option and never had that option. It's a very emotional, like, coming of age story. It's very messy, which I actually really enjoyed. It wasn't just like happy-go-lucky YA like trans stories. I've read a lot of those where it's just like, yay, everybody's super accepting eventually, besides like the one antagonist person who really hates queer people. That was not the case here. This was very much of a raw, really intense look at the differences, but also the similarities of people who are queer and trans in general. Like I said, with puberty blockers or without, later in life queer, or earlier with the teenager in this story. There's also a politician in this that reminded me a lot of a few other books I've read recently that are basically politicians that are supposed to be comparable to Trump. There's a super uber religious family in this book that was a lot. It was a lot. I really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed that it was a raw look at all of these subjects and these concepts about queer identity wrapped up in a very conservative area. But there was hope in it, even though a lot of it was very messy and very depressing. I ended up giving this 5 stars. I think it'll probably make it somewhere on my favorite books of the year list if it sticks to landing and nothing else beats it out by the end of the year. And then the last book that I read in the month of June was Those Who Wait by Haley Cass. I've been wanting to read a Haley Cass for years. She's apparently the queen of Sapphic, and I understand. I ended up reading this over the span of like 2 days. This is a 500 plus page lesbian romance of this girl. They meet on a dating app. This girl who has just come to terms with the fact that she's bi. Her friend like signs her up for a dating app, kind of against her will. the first person she talks to on there she thinks is really hot. And then they run into each other in real life in a very bizarre, like, coffee shop situation. And we find out that one of our main characters is involved in politics and is not out because of her career. And then our other main character is the daughter of a politician that she actually knows. And so, like, her professional and, like, dating groups collide because she's used to just doing one night stands. Our other character is just trying to explore her sexuality and wasn't really looking for anything super serious. And they end up striking up a bargain of basically sex lessons, teaching lessons of, like, this is what you can expect from a Sapphic relationship. I really enjoyed it. It was very spicy. This is the type of spice I really enjoyed. I like this way more than I enjoyed Clique, but I also just loved our characters in this. And I thought I had the third act breakup, like, pegged from the beginning, and I was wrong. And I'm glad I was wrong because I thought it was going to be way more like, oh, eye rolly, and it wasn't. I actually enjoyed the third act breakup, even though it was obviously frustrating, as most of them are. But I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. It was a great way to wrap up my queer reading for the month of June. Did I read Heaven Official's Blessing? No. Was that my main goal for the month? Yes. Have I read any fantasy books in... God, what was the last fantasy book I read? Nope, those were sci-fi. Those are all sci-fi. I've been reading sci-fi. Have I read any fantasy this year? Oh, shit. I'm literally scrolling up on my books I've read so far this year. I don't know that I've read any fantasy. I've read a lot of, like, dystopian sci-fi. I guess Ministry... No, that would also be... I was like, was Ministry of Time? No, I think that was also sci-fi. Technically, Don't Let the Force In was fantasy. But that's more paranormal. So the moral of the story being, the reason I haven't read Heaven Official's Blessing is because I haven't read fantasy in months. I could not tell you the last, like, high fantasy that I read. I'm trying to even think to the end of last year. I have to be in the mood for fantasy, and I have not been in it in months. I've been slowly dipping my toes back into sci-fi. But the high fantasy hasn't happened. But hopefully, I do still have my loan out of Heaven Official's Blessing. I am hoping to get to it in July, as I have said for months at a time now. So we'll see if that actually happens. If you are somebody who has read a lot of Don May and knows that there is a good place to start, not me cutting myself off because I had an alarm to film. If you are somebody who has read Don May and thinks there is a better place to start than Heaven Official's Blessing, I don't even think the problem is the book that I'm trying to read. I think the problem is I just don't read fantasy anymore. Or when I do, it's very, very, like, mood based, and I have not been in that mood at all. There's enough going on in my life right now. Or if you are somebody who wants to give me a pitch on exactly what Heaven Official's Blessing is about, and you have read it and enjoyed it, please give me a pitch of why I should read it in the comments down below. I would really appreciate that. But I hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you all for watching. I hope that you can like, comment, subscribe, interact with the video in some way. If you don't know what to leave me a string of pride flag emojis in the comments down below for Pride Month. I hope you had a happy Pride. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.